Hi, my lovelies. It's Vicky here, your host of this Raw Chatter podcast. And I'm following on from last week's podcast all about labels because it's come up in the last 2 or 3 weeks, quite honestly, about the way that we talk about ourselves and our issues or our illnesses. And whether you gelled with what was being shared last week or not, the whole labeling thing and then becoming attached to that label, it becomes our identity, is something that I want to delve a little bit deeper into. I was having a conversation recently with somebody, and we were talking about whether binge eating or emotional eating or binge drinking or stress eating happens to you. Is it a thing that happens to you? And this whole idea that it's a dis-ease, that it's an illness, it really does cause controversy within all the different aspects of people who work in the world of health. And I think what it boils down to is our interpretation of things. An eating disorder, does it happen to us? Alcohol addiction, does it happen to us? Or are we along for the ride, in which case it's happening with us? What I want to discuss really today, and I would love you to give me some feedback on this and just know what your comments are, because I am just sharing my opinion and I would love to hear yours from a different perspective. But the way that I look at things are that it feels like it's happening to you when you are in the midst of it. We tend to use terms like the illness is talking to me or in its clutches, and that kind of gives us this idea that the issue, call it a label, call it a dis-ease, call it an illness, has somehow got us, and we are kind of being held hostage and victim to it. And I absolutely agree that that is how it can feel. But when we can try and step back, almost like an observer, I'm going to invite you to question, is that really what's going on? Because actually, a lot of the time, though we might not want to admit it to ourselves, we enjoy the process. We are going along with it. We're very much actually in it and enjoying it. And for those people who are binge eaters, there is something quite nice about a binge. We can plan it and we can definitely look forward to it. We know that there is absolutely a dopamine hit from purging, from throwing up, from getting rid of that food. There's a sense of you being in control. And so are you a victim to it, or actually are you going along with it? Now, I don't know the answer to this, and I don't know if there is an answer. I think it very much depends on where you're at with what is going on for you. But the reason I want to talk about it is, if we look that we are actually a part of it and we're with it, then we are actually tuning into something that our body feels like it's pushing us towards. And in the world that I come from now, that is the space and the place of recovered, I look at that as your body telling you something, as your body and your brain collaborating to let you know that there are some issues, there are some things going on within your world that you need to be dealing with. Now, it may well be that those things are trauma-based. It may well be that those things are to do with your language and your belief system. It may well be that you've got a massive bacterial imbalance or hormonal issues that need addressing. The problem is when we're acting out on those behaviors, whether it's alcohol addiction or whether it's food, or whether it's gambling or whatever it is, or sex or shopping, we get so caught up in the action and then the following guilt and shame that it's very easy to look at it from a point of view of this is happening to me, but actually we are going along with it, which means that we can choose to not go along with it. Now, when you're in the throes of it, there's no way you're making that choice, right? That is just not going to happen. And I know full well that if somebody caught me in mid-binge, I would be, one, devastated, and two, I would definitely be absolutely ants in the pants, on edge, waiting for that person to disappear so that I could continue, right? Because there's no way I was not going to go through with what I've decided I was going to go through with. And My experience personally is that, but also from the people that I've worked with, that's also what they've said to me. And so in those occasions, we are definitely going with it, and we are actually feeling in control because we're making a choice to keep on going. Now, that might not be your story, but it's definitely mine. It's definitely some of the clients that I've worked with story too. And so what I wanted to share was if we can reframe how we talk about these issues and look at them as your body whispering to you. And I purposely called this podcast episode, Are You Listening? Because we might be hearing the message, go drink. We might be hearing the message, go eat. We might be going along with what is going on. Then we may actually be able to decide to do something different instead. Now, sometimes we can and sometimes we can't. But if we can stop feeling like we are kind of being held hostage or prisoner by these issues and start to recognize that actually they are trying to tell us something. There is another area in our lives that we need to be looking at. The food is not the issue. Our weight is not the issue. The amount we drink is not the issue. And I know it's really frustrating to hear that. Well, it was for me when I first heard it, because when I was in the throes of my bulimia and alcoholism, food was definitely a flipping issue, and so was alcohol. And when people would say that, I just want to grab them by the throat and shake them and go, you don't know what you're talking about. But actually, the truth is they did. They just didn't understand how incomprehensible that was to me when I was a person who was actually acting out and living with it day in, day out. So if that is you and you're hearing me say this, you probably want to slap me around the head as well and just say, of course the food's the thing, of course my weight's the thing. But actually it is not. Those are consequences. Those are actions that we are participating in because we want to somehow be able to just keep on going and manage whatever else is going on in our life that is actually the thing that we need to be turning into and looking at. Now, the problem with the majority of us is it's never just one thing. It's usually multiple things happening simultaneously. And this is why it kind of feels like a great big old mess. And it makes sense that your body and your brain, your gut-brain connection, your nervous system, and every single part of you is telling you, go do that thing. Because A, you can just fully focus on that thing, because that means then you don't have to think about or focus on anything else. So it's an escapism. And B, you're going to temporarily feel good, right? And it's worth it for that temporary feeling of kind of being in control for a short period of time and being able to enjoy it until we get past that point when we feel no longer in control and now we're not enjoying it. But that's where I would invite you to look at whether we can reframe how we look at this stuff and recognize that this is just our body and brain asking us to look at other areas of our lives. And how do you do that? Of course, that's the most important question. So realistically, and this is where, I did a podcast on this called Radical Honesty. We need to get honest with ourselves. And what most of us do, especially when we're actively acting out, is we are really rubbish at being honest with ourselves. Now, I'm not asking you to be honest with anybody else, but I am asking you to be honest with yourself. But that feels really hard because when we look at the stuff, that in itself can feel so overwhelming that we definitely want to go and drink on it, or we definitely want to go and eat on it. And this is where maybe this is an opportunity for you to perhaps write something down in a journal, perhaps put pen to paper, perhaps record something as if you are sharing it with somebody else, even if you don't want to. You may have a friend who you feel you can talk through this stuff with. And if you feel that they are going to hold your confidence and actually just listen to what you have to say, then maybe that is what you want to do. Alternatively, if you want to go down the road of reaching out to somebody like me, a coach who's been where you are, who can understand and just listen, not tell you what to do and not judge, then maybe that is the right thing for you. But my suggestion is this: And I'm going to put a little help sheet in the show notes that you can actually download to help you to start to do this. Is you need to actually get honest about what is really going on, because what I do know is that the thing is never the thing, right? The alcohol isn't the issue. Food isn't the issue. My weight wasn't the issue. My interpretation of what I thought a certain person who was attractive, an attractive female should look like, that interpretation, that idea that I had in my head, that was something that I needed to reframe, right? That was socially conditioned. That it wasn't even mine. The issues that were going on that I felt overwhelming, the sense that I wasn't good enough, the sense that I never quite reached expectations of others, that was something that I had to look at and I needed to look at. When money was an issue, instead of me running away from it and hiding my head in 2-3 bottles of wine and thinking, oh, I'll worry about it when the credit card bills come through, that was me just not facing up to reality. That was me literally burying my head in the sand, because in the time it took me to drink that alcohol, well, I could just forget about how much I'd just spent on it. Yeah. And until, the credit card bills did come through, or I looked in my purse and there were no notes left. There were only coins left. And yes, I have been there. I know what that feels like. And the idea then that turning to food or alcohol to make that situation any better, well, it's bloody ridiculous, isn't it? Because actually all it's going to do is make it worse. And when I really recognized in rehab just the financial cost, purely that on its own, of me being a binge eater and addicted to alcohol for all of the years that I was, I mean, the figures were astronomical that I spent. I could have had a big chunk of a deposit for a house with the amount of money that I spent. And yet money was always an issue. And it's no surprise and it's no coincidence that a lot of disordered eating, alcohol issues, anorexia and bulimia in particular, that people also have some serious money stories going on, coming from this lack and scarcity background. And again, this is stuff to look at. What's your money story? What was the money story of your parents and your family growing up? Was it always, we can't afford it? Was it always, money doesn't grow on trees? Did you pick up this socially conditioned idea that a female, if you are a female who is listening, is meant to look a certain way? Are you falling into the culture now, if you're a younger man, where you are being judged on whether you've got a six-pack or not? And, we look at young women as being those who are affected by social media, and still this idea of what the ideal perfect female body looks like. But guys are getting it just as much, if not more so. And I think it's worse for young guys because they're not talking about it. They're not talking about how it makes them feel. Whether you are somebody who is struggling to put on muscle because you're a naturally skinny guy who doesn't really want to work out in the gym, or whether you are somebody who is much, much bigger and is being teased or has been teased, because kids are awful. Teenagers are awful in a passive aggressive way. Younger kids are just downright nasty because they just come out with it and they don't give a shit. Right? But either which way, mud sticks, this stuff stays with us. So is it that stuff that you need to be looking at? And the reason that I'm posing all these questions is our turning to food or to alcohol is just a coping mechanism. But it's also a way of our body and our brain telling us, you need to be looking at your issues. And instead of running away from them, we need to stop doing the thing that's going to just make us feel more guilty and more ashamed and more embarrassed. We need to take the time out. And that's key, taking the time out to get honest. And so that's why I've added that little worksheet for you to actually do that. If you feel that you're ready to do it, to get honest and look at what is going on in your finances. What is going on with your relationship, with family members, and go through each one with your mum, with your dad, with your brother or your sister, if you've got multiple brothers or sisters, or if not, with cousins. What's happening with your friends? What's happening with your social life? If you've got a partner, what is going on there? because all of this stuff is the stuff that we can look at. And it's not happening to us unless we give it permission to happen to us. And if we can change that and go, actually, no, everything that happens in life is happening with me because I'm here. I'm going through it. I'm along for the ride for all of this. So it's not happening to me, it's happening with me. And then the difference is it happening with my permission? Or does it feel like it's happening without my permission because somehow I am just not feeling that I can in any way change it or take control of it? And if it's the latter, I'm going to invite you to look at that in a slightly different way and ask yourself, what are you hearing? And what do you actually need to be listening to? Just think about how you speak about yourself in your own head. Because if it's negative, if it's super critical, and for most of us who are going through this stuff, we are the worst to ourselves than we ever are to anybody else. The horrible language that we come out with about ourselves to ourselves is awful, right? A lot of it you would never even dream of saying to anybody else, and yet you do to yourself. So if we can look at that, this is something that you are actually doing with you. You're not doing it to you. You are doing it with you. It is you that's participating in this bullying of yourself. And therefore, you can decide to do it differently. Now, I'm fully aware that sometimes it doesn't feel like you've got the choice, right? And I'm not asking you to drive yourself batty and work yourself up into a frenzy about going, oh my God, I feel like even more out of control now. That's not helpful. But if you can actually get some clarity and awareness of just what are the real things that you need to be listening to, what is your body trying to tell you? If you're starving it because you've had a binge, it's telling you that's not going to work because you're setting yourself up to keep that feast, famine, binge cycle going. If you're turning to alcohol because you don't want to face up to your bank statement or to looking at the bills, they're not going to go away. They're not going to change. And chances are you keep spending money on alcohol, you're just going to dig yourself into more debt. There is nothing, I believe, that cannot be sorted if you start communicating and talking to people. You would be surprised who else is feeling like you are, who else is going through or has been through and come out the other side of the issues that you feel you are the only one dealing with. We all do feel like that at times. There is no doubt about it. We all feel nobody will understand. Everybody else seems to know what they're doing. They seem to have got it sorted. And I just don't. I'm too ashamed. I'm too embarrassed. I feel stupid. I feel ridiculous. Honestly, you would be surprised. This is why communities work. This is why groups work. And this is why just reaching out to even one person who will understand, who isn't going to tell you what to do, who isn't going to judge you, but is going to help you to be able to look at what do you really need to be focusing on? What do you really need to be listening to? Your body gives you a clue. Your mind and your brain also give you a clue. We're just not very good at taking those cues and clues and working out what we need to do with them. So I'm going to invite you today to stop calling yourself names, to stop saying that you are a victim of an addiction or that you are out of control, to stop believing that this stuff is happening to you because you're a terrible, horrible, awful person and you've asked for it and you deserve it. Let go of all of that stuff and let's take an honest look at what is it that you're really not listening to. And if you'd like some help with that, I would love to be able to help you. Please do reach out, connect with me by social media, just send me an email, and we can have a little conversation about where you're at and what you can do to help you to take the first steps to feeling free of all this stuff. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I wish you a great day.